Hello, my friends. Thank you, everybody, for joining the show today. Ray Overdorff is back on here, and I got Ray back on here because I wanted to talk about just eliminating those negative beliefs that pop up in your head. And if you're listening to this at some point during your day right now, you've probably had some pop in and you've tried to get rid of them. What do? I'm in the process as well. I'm in the practice as well. Not saying that I've mastered any of it because I have not in any way, shape, or form. But I think that Ray's somebody who really has throughout his life. So if you go back to episode 361 of the podcast or 51 of the podcast, you can hear these episodes with Ray and just give you an idea of who he is before we start things out. So Ray started and grew a seven-store chain of supermarkets from 1983 to 1988. He operated the stores until 2004. While overseeing those operations, he launched his own consulting and coaching business. He's worked with well over 50 organizations, developed more than 7,000 leaders since starting his coaching practice. He also serves as a coach's coach, having coached and certified over 1,000 business managers and executives, as well as coaching individuals in personal development. Ray has also presented hundreds of keynote addresses in a variety of organizations. He has personally worked with Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, Deepak Chopra, Les Brown, I'm not going to Zig Ziglar, Dennis Waitley, I'm just John Maxwell, okay? I think I've named enough. Ray knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for a long time, and he's actually a mentor of mine. I'm honored to be able to get him on the podcast and come on here and chat with me. So it's a chance for me to dig into his brain a little bit and for a chance for you to experience what Ray is all about. So I hope you enjoy this. Before we get there, Ray's all about meditation, huge into meditation, and I am as well. Now, he's been doing it a lot longer than I have. We can both attest to the advancement in your life, the clarity in your brain that meditation can bring. And one of the best ways to bring out that clarity the fastest, the quickest, whether you've been a long-time meditator or your first time ever, or you're just looking for a way to relax and kind of let all of your senses go and let your brain just kind of chill for a little bit. Or I guess in some people's cases it might not chill, but what I'm talking about right here is a sensory deprivation tank or a float tank. So it's like 2,000 pounds of magnesium sulfate. Very good for your skin, very good for your body. You lay in this tank and you float in there. You can't feel anything, you can't hear anything, you can't see anything. It gives your body a chance to decompress. And I go to the LHTA Wellness Center, which is in Evansburg, Pennsylvania. So the LHTA Wellness Center is where I float, and I love what they do there. They do an amazing job. I'm really happy that I found out about them. And if you're listening to this from the central Pennsylvania area, I would go to the LHTA Float Tank or Wellness Center. If you're not from the area, then I would suggest finding your own float tank wherever it is that you live, because I think every city and every part of the country, most likely, maybe not all of them, but most of them have them by now. So check that out for yourself. Dive in, find out more about what the float tank is about, and then you'll find out more about what's going on inside of your brain. If it comes to negative thoughts, then hopefully we can tackle that today with Ray Overdorff. Let's go.
This is Rob Z Radio.
Oh, that wasn't loud enough. Turn it up a little bit. Come on.
This is Rob Z Radio.
Ray Overdorff, welcome to the podcast once again. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here.
Always nice to have you here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So you were on episode 351 and 361, which you knew that before I did. You already had the numbers down. I forgot which episodes they were.
I just remembered it from whatever it was months ago. How many months ago was it?
I thought you listened to your own episodes a lot. I just assumed that's what was going on.
No. I listened to them one time, several months after we did it,
Yeah.
And then that was it. And after I listened to the first one, I took it home and I said, Carol, you got to listen to this.
Your wife?
Yeah.
And she liked it, right?
Oh, she did, yeah.
Cool. That's
She
good
said,
news.
Wow.
I got another fan then.
So who did that for you?
Who was talking?
Yeah.
Point your mic up just a little bit. Make sure you get all your voice. There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
That's good. So, if anybody wants to find out about you, go back. You can check out the other two episodes. If they need to legitimize your authenticity, they can go back and do that on the other
It's
episodes.
probably going to be a difficult job to do anyhow.
But on this one, I think, that thing's moving, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's see what's going on here. That's where it's supposed to be, huh? Okay.
That's always hard to say. Is it moving?
Yeah.
Son of
No, it's fine. Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, it is.
How about what if we just put it up like this and just move a little closer? Why it's probably because the microphone's too heavy. Yeah, just have So if you can put the whole bar up higher, and then the microphone can hang down. Like if you put the bar up. No, I'm saying if you put it up, you can do that too. If you want to. That works.
Not so much pressure on it, so maybe it'll work this way.
That'll probably work.
Can you hear it now?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me now?
You can hear me now.
So yeah, I think that what I want to focus on here, because I think this is super important, and you've been mentoring me for a while. We've gone through some really amazing courses together, and one of the things that lots of people, especially everybody battles with, is negative thoughts that pop into your brain, negative emotions, right? And I think owning my own business, I find that I was just talking to a lady yesterday, and here I had Angie Yazalitis on from the Yazo group, and we were saying about whenever you own your own business, negative thoughts and emotions are, they creep in all the time because you're running your own thing. You're at the helm. Somebody else is in control of it, and you can just kind of float along behind them. You have to be in control of this whole deal. And the self-development part of life, I think, when you start to own your own business, really kicks in full swing, or you understand the importance of it.
Yeah, it's really a multiplier.
Yeah.
You can have all the technical knowledge in the world, but if you fail to realize that the degree to which I develop myself personally is the degree to which I'm going to be able to be successful. Like we just talked about a couple minutes before we went on here about, talk to audiences about the book Think and Grow Rich, and ask them if, have you read the book? They raise their hand, and how many have read it more than once and 3 times, and then I always come up with, if you haven't read it 10 times or more, you haven't read it. Because, there's just so much in there. And if we don't have the frame of reference to collect that data, to create the concepts in our mind, that information just dissipates.
Yeah, or we manipulate it in however we decide to in our brain.
We take one idea, or we take one word, and we try to turn it into something else. So it's the interpretation. The interesting thing is we think with our mind and we feel with our body, and if we think a certain way long enough and we keep doing it, then the body really actually becomes the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that the emotions are running the show.
Yeah.
And when you talked about, breaking the habit of negative thinking, and that's what happens, I mean, you really kind of get yourself in that funk, but there's, it seems really, really difficult to get out of it, but it's not as difficult as it really appears.
For me personally, just from my own experience, the most difficult part is noticing it and realizing that it's not me. That was the hardest step, was like to understand like these negative thoughts or emotions aren't who I am. They're just the thoughts and emotions I grab a hold of, maybe the most often out of fear or stress or whatever that might be.
Well, the basis of all of that is fear.
Right.
Yeah, the basis of it is fear. Yeah, and when you get that negative funk or trend that you're in, one of the things that you can say is almost just what you said. That's not me. That's just the program.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that I had experiences in my life that caused me to feel a certain way, and I had them often enough that now when I experience something that causes me to feel that same way, then I get into that negative funk and I can't get out.
Yeah.
And and so.
And once you've ridden that road so many times, once you've gone down that path, it's so easy to get into that groove because you're so conditioned to it, right? So
a habit's nothing more than a belief you just thought, or a thought you just keep thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a belief, and you keep thinking it, and we can switch that real easy, by going to our imagination and imagining the thing that we want to experience.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of allowing the body, the feeling, when we feel something, then what we do is we send that message to the brain, and then the brain interprets that. Well, it's gonna, if it's a negative feeling you're feeling, then it's gonna interpret it in a negative way.
Yeah.
you know.
And it's also, and that's going to continue on and on and on. And I think, and this is just from my perspective and looking at other people, whenever you go through like because you've been doing this for a long time, right? You've been in this practice for a long time of assessing your brain and what your thoughts are doing and what your emotions are doing, and being able to disconnect yourself from those in a way to where you know that you know who you truly are. Not that these thoughts or emotions are you; they're just the ones you maybe have grabbed a hold of. But a lot of people, and maybe we could start back here, like in the beginning, like how the steps to even understand, because saying what you just said might be really confusing to somebody, because you and I are a little more advanced into this world. So somebody who's not advanced at all and who's listening to this thinking, man, I have these negative thoughts and I can't control them and I don't know how to get rid of them, and they are me. This is who I am as a person. What would you think is the first step there? The first piece of the puzzle? I mean, obviously pain would be one of the first steps. Like, you want to change this, you don't like it, and you see people that are happy, you understand that there's it's a possibility, but sometimes when you're having so many negative thoughts and those emotions come through, you start to think that those people who seem so positive are faking it. Like, they're just making it up. And they feel the same way as you do in reality and inside.
Well, the first thing is you don't want to suppress that negative feeling that you have. And that's what a lot of people do, because, you just spoke about a book,
The Untethered Soul.
The Untethered Soul. He talks about that in there as well. When you suppress that, then you actually make it worse.
Yeah.
So when you have a negative thought, you want to allow that thought to kind of reach its apex, to its highest pain point. But then, all emotions are either fear or love. Mm-hmm. And so we have a fear part of our personality, we have the love part of our personality. So when you have a negative situation like that, you allow it to get to its apex, and at that point, in your mind, you reach to the love portion of your personality and reach for the highest rung on that ladder that you can get. And so you actually replace that now with that feeling of love and appreciation or gratitude or whatever. And if you do that long enough, the stimulus that was giving you that negative feeling is going to atrophy and go away. One of the things I did eons ago, just kind of, behavior is not a absolute science. It can be highly predictable, but really, if you say behavior is a science, it's not. But I've always been introspective. And one of the things when I was being introspective, I said, there's really three of me. Here's the me I want the world to see. Mm-hmm. And here's the real me, which I struggle with trying to figure out who it really is. Mm-hmm. And then I look out there, and here's the me I'd really like to be.
Yeah.
And see, well, a lot of people spend the majority of their life trying to flaunt the me I want the world to see, which is really, identifying with the ego and putting stuff out there that's not you, and that's
trying to satisfy the outside
the phony
world.
That's the phony you.
Yeah.
And so that's the one you want to. And the degree to which you expand that phony me, as an example, then the real you actually atrophies and gets smaller. Mm. And the me I want to be gets smaller. Whereas if you begin to back off of the, promoting yourself as something that you're not, mm-hmm. if you work at identifying with who you really are, and then you begin to grow that, and then you look at, what is it that I really want to do? What is it that I really want to become? What is it? And really do the research on that and put together a plan, and the minute you begin to work on that plan, what happens is the real you begins to expand, because it's saying, wow, what took you so long,
Yeah.
And so now you're beginning to grow in a positive direction. And so I put that together years ago, and I've shared it with a lot of people. And most everybody identifies with it. Yeah, you're right. There are three of me, And the one that gets the least attention a lot of times is really the real me. And that's the one that's closest to our soul.
Yeah.
And that's who we really should be working to satisfy.
And when you're talking about, trying to be the person that you want other people to to believe you to be. That often can come from your parents if they didn't accept you as you were, and you're always trying to conform to be
Teachers.
something else. Teachers. Yeah.
I asked you a question, Johnny, do you know the answer to this question? And Johnny says, no, I don't. Or he stands up. So stand up, Johnny. Give me the answer. Did you do your homework? No. Sit down. Okay. And then he goes over to Susie. Susie, she did her homework, and he knew Susie had the answer. He said, Susie, what's the answer? She gives the answer. How many times did that happen in a child's lifetime in the school system and at home? So the more of that goes on, then the more difficult it is for people to, and they haven't been trained. They don't have a process.
Yeah.
That,
It's something that's unspoken, never really talked about in schools or probably not in most homes either.
And learning is a process. It's not an event. It's a process. And I hesitate to say this, but the business world and some parts of the education system don't understand that, to the degree that they need to. I put together, and I think came from, I'm trying to think of Gordon's Law of Learning and John Maxwell had put together a thing called the law process, and I had done the same thing. And it's looking at unconscious incompetence. It's a 4-quad matrix.
Okay.
And look at it, unconscious incompetence, saying I don't know what I don't know. So when we're in that posture, and we're all there in certain areas of our life, when we're in that posture, we can't get better.
Yeah.
So awareness or learning becomes the key to the next step. But that only says, okay, now I know how dumb and stupid I am. I now know what I don't know. And a lot of times it's where education stops. And so we don't really learn anything. We get the information, become aware of it, we play it back, we get a grade score, but we never apply it. So knowledge in and of itself is not power, but applied knowledge is. So what's the step? What's the strategy to move in to making something happen with that information? And that takes work, it takes effort, and it takes practice.
Yeah, and I think it hurts.
It
right?
does.
It's painful, and I think one of the hardest parts is it's going to be, to get rid of those negative emotions, you're probably going to experience more pain.
You have to. You need to.
Yeah.
You need. There's a book out there called Seed of the Soul.
Okay.
The author leaves my name right now, and it shouldn't, because I know, probably because I got this mic in my face.
The pressure's on.
Yeah. But he really has a handle on
Shoot.
and the whole change situation in terms of, and his position is, and I agree with him, because for myself, many times, out of wanting to be positive, when negative things would go up, I would just suppress them. And it's like putting a lid on a boiling pot of water.
Right.
It has to get out sooner or later.
You're almost feeding the fire.
You are feeding the fire. And what would happen then, I'd lose my temper and I would go nutso, And so you need to be able to let that boil and let the steam come out. But then what's the alternative to that? And if you think that our emotions are all rooted in either fear or love, and there's all kinds of different fears that come under each one of those categories. But if we can feel that fear and know that the love part of our personality has something to offer, and you go to that part of your personality, and if you continue to do that every time. So the key is awareness. It's knowing what you don't know, and then beginning to take some kind of action to overcome that. I mean, to me, that's the key. And as I said, behavior is not an absolute science, but it is predictable. And most of what I've learned is through contemplation, introspection, meditation, and life experience. And I've just done it over and lots of times. And I was never willing to satisfy or accept well, it can't be done, or I can't change, or you can't change. I was never willing to accept that. I'm not buying. When people say I can't change, I said, I'm just not buying. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I used to say that to my wife. It's funny that you say that right now, because we were just talking about this the other day, and she was talking in the past, like years ago. She would tell me like I could change the way I thought. I'd be like, I can't change. These are my thoughts. This is me. This is who I am. This is probably like less than a decade ago. Like, I can't change me. This is the person that I am. I honestly believed that. And as long as you believe that, no, you're not going to change. But when you start to see the cracks in the lining, like, oh wait, I can switch that if I put the work in.
Well, and that's a part of the awareness. The awareness, the fact there is that number one is that isn't who you are. Mm-hmm. It's only interpretation.
But when you haven't learned that process, when you don't know, what did you call that? Unconscious incompetence.
Unconscious incompetence.
I like that.
And then
good.
what happens is then you go to conscious incompetence.
So you're consciously aware of.
So now you know that you're a jerk,
Yeah.
But then where do you go from there? Most people stop there.
Right.
And where you want to get.
They're like proud that they're a jerk or something like that.
So then where you want to get to is conscious competence. And that's where, where you elevate your consciousness, you think about what you're doing, you think about why you're doing it, and then you practice. And at some point, you cross over the bridge into conscious or unconscious incompetence. And that's when you've created a habit. You've changed a behavior. And now you do it automatically.
Right.
So it's a process. And when you understand the process, it's not that difficult. And that's what any learning is, a process.
But you're talking about time here. You're talking about years. And I think that's the thing people struggle with. And whenever I told myself this years ago, like when I really wanted to change the way that I was internally, I knew, like I just accepted the fact, like if I've been living this way for say it was like I was like 28 when I thought of this or whatever, or 31 or whatever. Like if I'm 31 and I've been living this way my whole life, this is going to take a while to undo.
Sure.
So that's something you have to just accept, and that can be frustrating, right? Because you want to just do it now. I want it to change. I'm thinking differently. Make it stick.
Yeah, more so today than ever, because we're in this instant society. Everything is instant, and we want it now. But the other point that you made me think about is the fact that we relate to the interpretations of our thinking and the emotions. Every thought has an emotional counterpart. And of course the thought can be the stimulus, but if we do it often enough, then the actual feeling. So in this point, the feeling becomes the stimulus, and the thought responds to the feeling, and that's when the body really becomes the mind. It takes over, and now you're in a situation where how do that becomes more difficult to change. But we many times look at our experiences and say, this is who I am, and this is not who we are. This is just where we've been. This is the road we've traveled. This is a journey that we've been on. And I am not this negative thought. That's just a program that I received on that journey. And I can change that.
One of the things that, and I repeat this to a lot of people, that you told me, I don't know where you got the information from, but you could probably tell me that we have about 80,000 thoughts a day.
80,000 thoughts a day at least.
And what, 99% of those are old thoughts.
The same thoughts you had yesterday, the day before.
Years before.
The day before.
So think about that, and like, man, just think about that right there. And it's so, once you put that in your brain, you're like, well, yeah, of course. Why would I have new thoughts? How would I get them unless I am out there learning new things and pushing my brain to learn, right? If you don't do that, then you're going to live in the same thoughts. So when you think like trying to imagine yourself, somebody, just to give an example, like, somebody says, I'm going to fly an airplane, and you're like, well, you don't know how to fly an airplane. How could you ever do that? You don't know how to. And your brain would say, yeah, you idiot, you don't know how to fly an airplane. You've never done that. Why would you? But of course your brain might say that because it doesn't know the experience of learning how to do it. So your brain's always going to refer back to not knowing because it doesn't know. Did I talk myself in a circle there? I can't think of it.
We're all there at some point. I think the best example that comes to my mind right now is Roger Bannister, and most everybody knows that he broke the 4-minute mile, and he didn't break it by minutes; he broke it by seconds. You know, and prior to that, everybody said, you know, if you tried to beat the 4-minute mile, your heart would explode and jump out of your chest. You know, I mean, they said it's impossible, can't be done.
Right.
But he did it.
And how did he do it?
And because he believed in it, and he worked at it, and he worked at it, and then within like 30 days or 13 days, like 40-some people broke it.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Once you break that barrier, that perceived barrier of limitation, then you open it up for the whole world.
Yeah.
Everybody has it now. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. It's incredible.
And the same thing with the Wright brothers. You can't fly a plane. You can't do it. Well, once they broke that barrier that they did fly it, but it was only 40 feet, you know, the first run.
Yeah.
And once they broke that barrier, then everybody starts thinking, oh, my God, you can't fly.
Yeah.
It's a whole different story.
And so that person, Robert Bannister or the Wright brothers, they had such a strong imagination.
Yes.
Would you put that way?
Yes.
Their imagination was so strong that they could visualize that happening even though it had never been done before.
And they had broke out their own limiting thoughts and their own limiting emotions because they had a belief, and that's the beauty. We all have that. So when you think about this, awareness, acceptance of what is allows us to make a choice. And then once we make choice, then we can go anywhere we want to go with it.
Yeah.
It's up to us, you know, as to how far we want to take that.
Yeah. I guess the toughest part is, because I look at somebody like that, I always go back to Arnold Schwarzenegger time and time again, because I always remember reading his book and like.
Well, you were right in the time when he was in his best too.
Yeah.
You were growing up.
And my dad loved him, and I've always just kind of idolized him. And like he always talked about his vision. He would vision when he won Mr. Universe, when he won Mr. Olympia, when he became a world-renowned actor, when he became the governor. Like he would physically vision that in his head. And I guess some people are just either lucky enough to be born with that imagination and vision and confidence, or it was given through, you know, their family, like somebody in their life.
Somewhere in his association, he picked up on the idea, but it's exactly right, because anything of a material nature or accomplishment, before it is manifest as we can see it, or, you know, whether it's a physical thing or whether it's us accomplishing something, it has to be in a vision, in a non-material sense. And so what he was able to do, whether you understand that process intellectually or whether he just discovered it, it doesn't matter, because that's how we can create anything in our lives. Is we have that gift of imagination, instead of allowing our past experiences, you know, to our memory and our emotions to use us. There's times when we want to use that information because some of it's good, but we can use our imagination to create whatever it is we can create. And then we can live into that imagination. And that's when you're creating a whole new set of feelings and emotions for yourself, because you're actually creating your life by design, by using your imagination to picture, to visualize that. And the more detail, the more intensity, and the more frequency adds to compressing the time between when we have that vision and when we're able to see that vision in its fruition.
Yeah, it's just attaching it to your emotions, attaching it as a part of you.
Yeah.
And what you were saying there at the beginning, it was really super important, and I didn't realize it when I was younger, but like whenever you were saying, the more you reject that emotion and push it back down, and I still do this with my wife. She says that I keep her from having emotions because I don't want to feel the emotion. Because she can have a strong emotion and let it go. I get a strong emotion, it sticks to me. And that makes perfect sense to me, because that is exactly what has happened throughout our relationship. Is she has a strong emotion, and I try to force her to repress it because I don't want to feel it. But you have to accept it. You have to let it.
Actually worse than that. It's actually worse than that because the feeling of fear that expresses itself in fight or flight, that goes back to our background, our heritage, when that was a good thing, because lives were at stake. You needed it, and so you went into fight flight. Now, when you feel that emotion, you're supposed to suppress it. Well, what happens is if it can't go outward, then where does it go? It goes inward. And so it ends up creating stress, and it ends up actually can turn into disease because you're turning that energy in, and you want to be able to let that energy get out. But then how do I manage it once I let it out, rather than going crazy with it?
Yeah, but that's the first step. Like that's the first stage.
Yes.
Past that, what would you say is, if you can manage to do that and say you do it once or twice and you notice, wow, I'm letting these emotions out, I don't feel quite as bad. Because the thoughts are going to keep coming. It's not like I let the negative emotion out, I'm all better now, course finished. Like it's just like the beginning chapter, right? So what's like the stages past there that you've experienced and that really everybody experiences?
Well, I think as a society we've allowed ourselves to become externally influenced or externally directed, and we've in my lifetime I've seen that shift where we've become more externally directed and more me focused, and I think that has to shift, because in order to really appreciate, or if we assume that happiness is outside ourselves, and we make that assumption, then the assumption in and of itself says that I can't be happy unless other people allow me to be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, what an absurd assumption to make, actually, when you think about it.
It's ridiculous when you really think, when you put it into perspective like that.
Yeah. So
you're relying on other people to make you feel the way you want to feel.
I mean, it goes in a relationship. I can't be happy unless you love me. That's a bunch of malarkey. I mean, that's not true.
Yeah.
You can be happy whether somebody responds to your relationship or not. I mean, happiness is about giving what you have to offer, giving love, giving respect, giving caring for someone else. And that is the happiness. So the thing that most people, and I'd say many, but most, are searching for outside themselves lies within.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm of the opinion, and this is one of my focuses, is that we have to make that shift from being externally directed, internally focused in terms of what's in it for me, to being internally directed, connecting, understanding that I'm not a standalone, separate individual from this whole universe and everything that's going on. I'm an integral part. I'm connected. I'm like a drop in the ocean. Mm-hmm. I'm part of it. And if I think I'm separate and I'm operating like the ocean isn't a part of me, and it is, then I'm misleading myself. And there's no way to happiness.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying it's outside itself. It's judgment, and it's doubt and fear. Mm-hmm. Where when we begin to make the shift to being more internally directed, and through contemplation, through meditation, through the idea of when you're in that funk of a negative emotion, or when you're in that situation, excuse me, and you're feeling that negative, allowing that to come up, but then realizing that through awareness, through acceptance, comes choice. And I can choose another feeling. Mm-hmm. And then I can choose another interpretation.
To say it sounds so wonderful. When you're in the moment of anger or fear or whatever, what practical thing do you do? Because you've practiced this for a long time to grab another emotion. Like what does that actionably look like for you?
Will you look at a time when you felt good? It can be, I mean, you can create some. Maybe you're at your beach, or you were at a birthday party, or you were at a family event, or anything that where you had that good feeling, and then use that as kind of like your anchor, and continue to look for those kinds of things, and then you can go get those and use those at that time when you need it.
So you're saying like hold on to that when you think of the emotion, or you think of the event and the emotion you had with it. You've attached the emotion, so you're just kind of extracting that emotion from that memory.
Yeah, no different than what you're doing with the negative emotion. Now you have a positive emotion that over here, and now you're reaching for that emotion, that expression that you have. And when you understand that everything is either love or fear, all emotion is either love or fear. It's rooted in one or the other. So you reach for the emotion of love and joy and peace, and think, when was a time when I felt joyful? When was a time when I felt peace and serenity? You reach for that rung on the ladder, and that becomes your growth opportunity, your step forward.
And that's going to be something that you have to do over and over and over again. Because it's not going to work right away. It's going to be very hard.
But it gets easier.
Yeah,
and
the more you do it.
Once you see some success. And I'll use my father as an example. My father was a Pennsylvania Dutch, very strict, very structured, very stern. And I remember we were in literature class, and the instructor said that nothing's either good or bad except that thinking makes it so. And I raised my hand and I said, come live with me for a week or so. And I said, you'll see that differently.
Yeah.
They said, who was this guy anyhow, And so he starts talking about Shakespeare, and, like 20 years later, I'm saying, what a genius, But the world that I lived in was very clear, right and wrong.
Yeah.
It was black and white. And that was it. And Pop did a very good job at raising us. And a lot of times I wasn't very happy with him. But when I really started thinking about it and I looked back, I said, did he ever do anything other than something that he thought was going to benefit? He cared for and he loved us, and he made the tough decisions that he thought he had to make in order to teach and train us to be good people. And I respect him for that. When I changed my interpretation of what I initially felt in those situations, my whole interpretation of my father changed. And I idolize him now.
You had to be disconnected from it, or I guess just grow up to be able to
and really
see
think it through. Yeah, and really. And so the process of I can change, and the point I'm trying to make is you can change. But first you have to be aware. Second, you have to accept what is. And then the third step is make a choice. With a choice, you always have the opportunity to make a choice.
When we were starting to do this podcast, before we started, you said it's very simple. It's really very simple. That's the funny thing, is it is simple. But
I didn't say it was easy.
It's not easy. But the concept is simple, right? The hardest part is going back to it and hitting it over and over and over again because it's so painful to want to. There's so much pain involved in, like, I failed again. You beat yourself up over it, get yourself into more negative thoughts because you failed it, and it's like.
But if you find yourself making a little progress, I don't think there's anything in life more euphoric.
Yeah.
Than
basking in that.
When you make progress and you make personal development part of that, and when you feel, it's addictive. When you see some progress in yourself, and you whether you read a book, listened to tape, went to a seminar or whatever, and you actually applied that information, and you said, my God, I could never believe that I could do this, or I never believed that I could get rid of this emotion that I lived with for years.
Yeah.
But then when you see that change, and now you're kind of hooked.
Yeah.
You're like, give me more of this.
Right. And I think also one of the tough parts of that is, because this just happened to me the other day, whenever you have like a really good day. I had a really good day the other day, and I was like just basking in the good day, and man, it was so wonderful. It was so Later on that night, I started having negative emotions, and I was starting to get like I was just getting into my old funk, I guess it would be what you could call it. And I was like, Rob, 2 hours ago you were just like living, in cloud nine, like you had a great day and you were really happy about the way the day went. And you got things accomplished that you really wanted to do, and it was a big step forward. But now all of a sudden you've just forgot about those great emotions. You forgot about how good the day was, and now you're living in this other place. I guess it's the place that I tend to come back to. That's like the old place that I used to be in a lot. So I've internally just told myself, and I've heard this through meditation many times as well, like you have to let both of those, the good and the bad, don't revel in either one for too long, because both of them can be toxic. See me if I'm explaining this correctly, but in my mind it's like if you revel in something that was really, really good and you really try to live in that moment, you're only going to become sad that you're not in the moment anymore. You're only going to be sad because you're not going to be able to, you can't live in that spot forever. It happened. It's in the past. It occurred. Be happy for it, but don't try to live in it and relive it. You can relive the emotion. You can bring that feeling back up, as you said, and try to put that in other situations when you're feeling bad. But if you try to stay in that spot, you're going to be disappointed because you can't stay in that high level of happiness. Or am I wrong on that?
Well, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of what you were saying is I was getting my happiness from my attachment to that event.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
if you get your happiness from your attachment to that event, then by the virtue of the fact that you were attached to it, and life is ever changing and things evolving, there comes a point where you're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Because you're going to lose that attachment to that no matter what.
Yeah.
But if you appreciate the experience and you let it go, and that's the secret, whether there's an attachment to a positive, I went to the shore, and if you attach, we owned a beautiful house up on the hill, 40-some hundred square foot and all the amenities, and we lived there for 30 years. And one day I was cutting the grass, and I said, a guy shouldn't hold himself hostage to a decision he made 30 years ago. It's time for me to move on. And I loved living there, but I wasn't attached to it. Walked away and never went back, and never felt anything other than the joy and the pleasure of having experienced it. And that was in a material thing.
Yeah.
Had I been attached to that, then I'd constantly be going back and saying, I wish I were back there. I'd be unhappy, whatever.
Yeah.
So whether it's a negative emotion that you're attached to, or event or thing or material, or it's a positive, either way, one of the Buddhists say the answer is detachment.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be it. You can experience it, you can enjoy it and appreciate it, but once you attach yourself to it, then you become subject to being unhappy.
Yeah, right. Because you've attached yourself to that place and that feeling, and it's never going to happen again. You can never get it back. So you're just going to be chasing a mirage.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
it's the same way with people. I already used my father, so I'll use him again. And when he passed away fairly early in his life, and I was extremely resentful for a day or two.
Yeah.
And then I stepped back and I looked at him and I really thought about what he was all about, what he did, and what he did for us. And I said, he did his work.
Mm-hmm.
He's free to go wherever.
Mm-hmm.
And I have nothing but honor and appreciation for what he did for all of us.
Yeah.
And so it's how you're able to interpret. Life's an interpretation.
Your own.
Your own. Go back to how we started out. We think with our mind, we feel with our body. And we feel with our body, and our mind interprets those feelings
into thought. Yeah.
And sometimes it gets them messed up.
Right, because we don't associate them just as feelings. We're attaching them to events and situations, and that's the real problem.
Yes.
Yeah,
you know.
whether good or bad.
But the bottom line, I think, is the goal, the ultimate goal for me in life is happiness, and I'm in charge of that. And I can, I can seek those things that bring me pleasure and happiness, and I can avoid those things that don't. But if I get myself in a situation, I'm aware that I'm there. I accept it. I make another choice.
Mm-hmm.
I can choose whatever I want.
Yeah, let's cap it on that, because that's good. You can choose whatever you want. You got to put the practice in. It's a constant work in progress.
Yes.
But a work in a positive direction, because you're either going forward or backwards. You're never standing still. If you think you're standing still, you're going backwards.
You're going backwards.
So you have to you have to push yourself to that spot. And personally, I'm extremely excited to get to that spot. I mean, the work is I feel like I'm getting a lot better at it, and I feel like I'm more satisfied in it. And
the thing that I've learned is, when you do the work and you continue to progress in my life, there's nothing more euphoric than that personal development, that personal growth, that understanding something better and being able to express differently, and that carrying what you put out there, giving and putting people out and helping people.
Mm-hmm.
There's first learning about for yourself, and then sharing that with other people. You're trying to get it from other people all the time. The joy isn't there. That's a selfish move, and it's not there. But when you're able to share information and you care about people, and you learn and then you share, I want them to put on my stone, he cared and he shared.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I love that. Okay, yeah, I think that hopefully people listening to this got a good sense. I don't know where you're at in your journey, whoever's listening, but there's many different places where you can get this kind of information, but I think until you sit down and really just start working on it yourself, and you start to see like you said about seeing the progress. Like, I notice whenever I see progress in, say, my wife and I get into an argument, and in a situation where I used to explode and lose my mind, now I'm calm as a cucumber, which does happen now, and I'm like, oh wow. And then when you recognize that, and you're like, holy cow, I used to lose my mind over something like that, trigger.
And you begin to see yourself differently.
Yeah. And you're proud of yourself.
Yeah,
that just makes you proud.
You begin to express differently on a day in, day out basis.
Because I don't care how much you might enjoy, you think that you enjoy lashing out on somebody, releasing all that energy, whatever that is. There might be joy in the moment, but there's shame afterwards.
Yep.
Whether you want to admit it or it's in your subconscious or whatever, there's shame involved in that. And when you get to the point of not wanting to get retribution on somebody, just maybe almost feeling sorry for them in a way, or what would that be like? But just have empathy for them would be the way to say it, I guess. When you can have empathy for them instead of wanting to get revenge on them, there's nothing more powerful than that.
Revenge is toxic.
Yeah.
For you and for them. You
Yeah.
know, and so we don't, and our whole society, until we really get that message. I mean, we did what we had to do when we had to do it, but we didn't quit soon enough, and we haven't started to look at things differently. And until we stop trying to get revenge on those who violate our civil rules and regulations, we're going to have the kind of challenges that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to give up on that. As long as we have, people probably hit you over the head once they hear this, but as long as we use capital punishment as a revenge tool, and as terrible as taking somebody's life is it any different taking somebody's life for that person that took somebody else's life? What is different about that?
The person who did it themselves?
It's just who did it.
Yeah.
Here a committee did it, or an entity did it, and here an individual. They had good reason, they thought, for what they did.
Yeah.
And so this entity over here said they had good reason for what they did. And until we get over that, until we grow beyond that,
Yeah.
we're going to still have these challenges in our society, because that undermines who we really are.
Well, especially when you're throwing somebody in jail for being addicted to drugs. It's obviously there's something internally wrong with them. They need therapy compared to being locked in a cell or whatever that might be.
What kind of growth are you going to get from that?
Yeah.
It's not. The whole system has to change its philosophy, and then it can do it. It's been done, and there are countries where they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Germany, as an example, it's got some really good
they had to go through
examples.
They had to go through the worst to get to the best, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to go through all the pain to get to the...
Exactly. Sometimes you have the awareness, the acceptance of who they really were, and said, we don't like what we're looking at here.
Yeah. That's a great example, yeah.
And they made a choice to begin to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got a long way to go. Lots of opportunity.
Something to look forward to, right?
One soul at a time, right?
Cool. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
If people want to find, is there one way they can get a hold of you? Like if they are interested in talking to you, if they listen to this and like, I gotta talk to Ray. What would you suggest they do?
Well, there's multiple ways, and go to my website my email, which is roverdorff@aol.com or ray@trueadvantagegroup.com, or you can always call me on the phone. I don't have a message on my phone just because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back to people or not. So just call if I don't answer. I mean, I usually answer all of my calls within 48 hours. But 814-312-6422. And I'd love to talk to you no matter who you are.
Cool. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you next time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed Ray. He's such a great guy. And if you like this episode, please go back and listen to the other two episodes with Ray, 361 and 351. Ray was on both of those, and he dropped lots of knowledge on those as well. So the episode on 361 is really about this Intermetrics Advanced Insight profile that you can take. It's like the holy grail of personality profiles. I went through it, and then Ray and I went through it together and discussed it on the podcast. That was on 361, and then if you go back to 351, it was my first introduction of Ray to my podcast. So it was kind of just an idea of how to create the best you, really, is what we dove into. And they're both fascinating along with this one, so thank you for checking it out. Also, I'd very much advise you to check out DDP Yoga. All right, DDP Yoga, Diamond Dallas Page, old school wrestler from back in the day, created this magnificent yoga program. And I think you should dive in and try this thing out because DDP Yoga has changed my body, changed my life. And I'm not just saying that, I'm 100% serious. They don't pay me to promote them on here. I mean, I do get free access to the app, which is a great trade-off because I use it all the time. But what's really cool about DDP Yoga is it's an app, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of workouts on this app. You can have it on your phone, on your iPad. So I have an iPad and an iHome for my TV, right? So I have it on my iPad, and then I project it onto my main TV screen. And I have, like, if I'm looking down, I can see it on the iPad. If I'm looking up, I see it on my TV. It's a great way to work out and a great way to... it's a different level of yoga. It's a different kind of yoga is what I should say. It's more active, intense yoga. It's more energy, high energy. Like I like relaxing yoga sometimes, but I love high energy yoga, and that's what DDP Yoga brings. And, I lifted weights for a long time. I've done a bunch of different physical activities. I'm not going to go into all those right now, but nothing has ever given me better satisfaction than DDP Yoga. When I'm done with these workouts, I am fully satisfied. I'm not saying that to try to sell you anything. I'm being 100% honest with you. And when I don't do it for several days, right now I'm 3 days off, and my body's like asking me for it. Like, Rob, when are we going to do DDP Yoga again? I'm 100% serious on that. You need to try ddpyoga.com. Thank you, Zebras, for listening. All the music on this podcast is by my man, Jake Over. Jake Over. Find him on Facebook. He's a music producer. Does an awesome job. I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace out.
This is Rob Z Radio.